Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case, the sins that betray us. It was a warm Parisian evening, and fog rose from the Seine. It mingled with the smog of industry and clouded the gas street lights that dimly lit cobblestone streets. Beside the Seine, in the 4th arrondissement, was La Force prison, within which was the man Eugène Vidocq, whose wrists were shackled to the dungeon wall by cold steel chains and ankles bound by manacles. Eugène had black, curly hair and long, thick sideburns that taunted the corners of his mouth. He wore rags. His nose was still bruised from the scuffle. To detain him, when 5 men were needed to pin him down and capture him. "Monsieur," he said, speaking to Julien de Veria, the Parisian chief of police. "I became a criminal the night my father had me arrested as a boy." When those gendarmes had turned up and taken him away to a cell that night, he had felt betrayed, devastated, and humiliated by his father. Above all, he had felt angry, and that anger had stayed with him all his life, a chip on his shoulder that had been ever present in his interactions and informed his life choices. Julien sat in the opposite corner of the dungeon on a wooden stool. His top hat lay in his lap, and his walking cane leant against the wall. He remained as still as a gargoyle. "Your trial for treason commences at first light, and you wish to reminisce about your father. Do not waste my time." The flame of torches lining the walls flickered. A rat scurried between iron bars and retreated into the shadows. "I have watched the guillotine sever the head of my dear friend César Herbeau. This cannot be my fate." He shook his head. The surprised look upon César's face as his head fell to the ground was forever etched in his memory. He could not shake it, could not recall how César used to smile, or the jovial times they had shared in local brothels. "You have deserted from the army. You have stolen, you have forged, and you have destroyed marriages. Why would I care about your fate?" Orange from the flickering flames glinted in Julien's eyes. A distant scream echoed around the chamber. It briefly registered to Eugène like the sound of a new prisoner being subdued into his iron attire. "Monsieur, I crave a life no longer on the run," said Eugène, thinking of his recent arrest. His estranged wife, who left him for a soldier, had found him back in Paris and reported him to the gendarmerie. He could never be free while the sins of his past stalked his being. "Such is the fate of a criminal. Why would I care about what you crave? You are wasting my time," Julien said, snatching up his cane and smashing it against the stone wall. He stood. Monsieur, s'il vous plaît, let me tell you what I can do for you, so as not to waste any more of your time. Julian pushed out the backs of his jacket and sat carefully on his stool. Proceed. Thieves adore me. Hardened wretches esteem me. I drink and mingle in their circles. I have their trust. I know their hearts. I will gather their secrets and share them with you. We have informants already. Why would I need you, monsieur? I will be the best of them all. Of your informants, do any have as much esteem amongst the other criminals? Of your informants, have any been as cunning as me to escape prison so many times, even dressed as a nun to avoid detection? Sir, I will go to lengths those simpletons could not even imagine imagining. I will be your best informant, monsieur. I know this without a doubt, and I think you do too. I can't trust you, monsieur. When my late father had me arrested as a boy, my fate was sealed. In my mind, I became a criminal. It has taken my whole life to realize he did that out of love. I can be different. I can be of use to society. I can be the man my father knew I could be. I don't know if you can, monsieur. I've seen the end. I've seen my friend's head freed from his body by guillotine. I know that God's grace has all but kept me alive. I will be as devious as I was in crime, but use those skills to catch the criminals and make Paris safer. He shook his head. Just as the rats carry the plague, I fear you spread a vile truth. Monsieur, s'il vous plaît, just give me one last chance. Please. Julian was silent. We will hold off your trial in the morning. But know this, you are one mistake from execution. I want intelligence, actionable intelligence, or you'll be seeing your father sooner than you had imagined. He stood, gathered his cane, placed his top hat on his head, and waved to a guard outside the cell to let him out. Eugene put his head back on the stone wall and blinked away a tear. He would be tireless. He would be disciplined. He would use the tricks and the cons and the black arts he had learned. It was clear that Julian barely believed what was said, but that was fine, because he knew what was there in his heart. And it was true, and with time, he would prove it. He felt the anger that had fueled his heart for so long start to thaw. The miserable wretch that was his soul felt a flicker of hope. His father had loved him and had wanted him to be the best he could be, no matter how tragically he had tried to teach that lesson. And now he understood that it was only ever a lesson. He could become the man his father knew he could be. Murder at Aix-Ircon, the extreme ironing convention, was infamous in Preston. For the last 8 years, extreme ironers from around the world fell upon the city. Their antics in the streets caused emergency calls for days. Ironing on top of city buses. Ironing while hang gliding over downtown. Ironing while belaying down the cupola of City Hall. Every year, there was one incident that truly left its mark on Preston. This year, the incident would be the death of Sean Morrison. I looked down at Sean's body, his face brutalized by a blunt object. In any other situation, identifying the murder weapon might have been tricky. But not here. Not at XIR Con. There was no mistaking the iron-shaped dent in the dead man's head. I had seen it before. I clenched my fists, remembering the day that my wife had been murdered 8 years ago. The image of her face haunted my nightmares. Beautiful until it had been ruined by a Bosch TDA 2650 G-Bide quick fill, the highest rated iron of 2012. Preston's coroner had estimated the time of death at about 2:15 a.m. The murder weapon had not been found yet, and the trail of blood leading out of Sean's hotel suite had run cold quickly. No witnesses had come forward. The extreme ironing community was notoriously tight-knit and likely to protect their own. They had done so in the past. Detective Clay, they're ready. A police officer on scene had separated the suspects, and she handed me a list of names. I squared my shoulders and got started with the interview process. Anna Kruger, the hotel manager, was already in Sean's suite, pacing around and surveying the extensive damage. Pieces of drywall and broken glass littered the carpet, and the telltale burn marks of overly hot irons defaced the furniture and carpet. I watched her until she stopped mid-pace near the end table next to the couch and knelt down. Anna stuck her arm in a hole in the wall and pulled out a Panasonic A66K automatic iron. I never would have allowed these extreme ironing United States assholes to have XIR Con here again if I weren't so hard up for money. At least they rented out the entire place. Anna glared at the iron-shaped hole in the drywall. They always ruin something. They leave burns and run up the electric bills, plugging in all their stupid irons. She raised her eyes to meet mine and brandished the iron. But this time, Sean went too far. When was the last time you saw him, Miss Kruger? He came down last night, around 11, asking for more towels. She pointed at a pile of charred towels near the couch. I can see why he asked. Anna held out the Panasonic iron, her hand shaking. The temperature gauge is on the highest setting. He was burning things on purpose. If he were still alive, I'd sue him into oblivion. Miss Kruger, do check with that ironing board vendor, detective. I had to chase him out of the storage room around 2:30 this morning. Mighty suspicious, if you ask me. Errol Fleming. the owner of the Cleveland Ironing Board Company, leaned against the wall in his room. "That damned Sean," he growled, German accent thick on his tongue. "He ruined me. He posted negative reviews of my new ironing board design and used his extreme ironing championship fame and influence to boost them." "Go on," the Cleveland steamer. It was a board made specifically for steam irons. Sean was a proponent of steam irons, but he said my board had a shitty design. His was the #1 review on Amazon. Everyone saw it. My profits tanked. No one bought. I am glad he is gone. I'm sure his negative reviews were the only reason no one bought the board. Errol's eyes widened, and he straightened his back. I am not happy he is dead. That is a terrible thing to say. I am innocent, of course. Mr. Fleming, can you tell me what you were doing in the storage closet last night? Color rose to his cheeks. I cannot say. It would ruin me. I thought your business was already ruined by Mr. Morrison. Yes, my beautiful Cleveland steamer. But I had other boards in development. What does this have to do with your excursion? Errol sucked in a breath and held it until I thought he might faint. Finally, he breathed out and answered. I was looking at the hotel's ironing boards. I frowned. I couldn't come up with any good ideas, he wailed. I was looking for inspiration. You can't tell anyone that I'm an ironing board design fraud. Errol slumped back against the wall. Godverdammt, he whispered. Thank you for your time, Mr. Fleming. Please, wait. You should talk to the tall man with curly hair. I saw him sneaking out of Sean's room last night, after 2. Thomas Prince. The tall man with curly hair was Thomas Prince, a longtime advocate for the use of steam irons over dry irons in the extreme ironing competition world. Thomas was a prolific donor to Kickstarter campaigns for new steam iron technology, and he wielded a Rowenta DW52701 Focus Excel steam iron during competitions. He looked up from the hotel bed when I walked in, eyes red and puffy. Detective, I hear you were out late. Yeah, I went to see Sean. Any particular reason? We're friends. Thomas frowned and corrected himself. Were friends, Mr. Prince. Your visit makes you the last person to see Sean alive. That doesn't mean anything. Have you talked to Noah yet? He was going to drop some major news on us tonight, and Sean got wind of it yesterday. He was so upset. What news? Sean wanted to take over Eos. He thought Noah was doing a shit job, and he's never been shy about voicing his opinion. Noah threatened him, so Sean took a swing, caught him right in the jaw. Good thing he has a weak punch. Go on. Thomas leaned back. Not much else to say. I went to Sean's room to talk him down after that. He was pretty shaken up and talking about leaving EUs completely. Noah had really gotten him riled up. I appreciate the information. In the meantime, I would like you to stay right here. Thomas shot me an annoyed look. Am I still a suspect? You were seen leaving Sean's room last night, and his body was found this morning. I'd say you're the primary suspect. I called for additional officers to watch Thomas's room while one officer remained inside. Noah Bowers. I approached the sullen president of Extreme Ironing United States, Noah Bowers, in the hotel's business center. He looked up from his seat at a small conference table. Before I could say anything, Noah spoke. You think I did it, don't you? I didn't say that, but you know I threatened him, right? Well, he threatened me first. I didn't want him to, think I was intimidated. Noah stood up and spun one of the chairs. Look, bro, Sean was a dick, okay? That's no secret. So he wanted to oust me and, take over as president of the EIUS. That doesn't mean I killed him. I said nothing. Noah grunted and crossed his arms. If you really want to know who did it, you should talk to his fiancée, Marin, bro. She was gonna, poison him or something. Marin knocked. I visited Marin in her hotel room. She was sitting calmly on the hotel bed, watching a reality show. And she didn't bother to look up as I entered the room. I understand you found Sean this morning, Ms. Knox. Sure did. I went in to make sure he was up in time for the convention. He liked to sleep in. You had access to his room? She stared at me. Duh. We were engaged. You don't seem upset that your fiancé was murdered. Marin shrugged. I'm not. He was an abusive, cheating piece of shit. And I was going to end things tonight. But now I have to thank someone for saving me the trouble. I understand you were planning to poison Sean. Marin cocked a thin brow. Why would I poison him when I could leave him? That's why I got my own room in the first place. I was thinking of putting eye drops in his food so he'd shit his guts out. So yeah, maybe that's technically poisoning him, but he wouldn't have died or anything. It's still an actionable offense, Ms. Knox. Whatever. Like I said, I didn't do it. She paused in thought. You should talk to Eddie. I saw him arguing with Sean yesterday. It looked pretty heated, but I didn't stick around to listen. Probably something to do with steam versus dry irons again. Eddie's crazy for dry irons. Eddie Wu was doodling on hotel stationery, but he put the pen down as I walked into his room. I understand you and Mr. Morrison exchanged words yesterday. We have the same argument every time we see each other, Eddie said, sitting up a little straighter. He's always going on about steam iron superiority, but he fails to see the beauty and simplicity of a classic dry iron. When did you last see Mr. Morrison? Eddie continued, as though I hadn't spoken. Using a dry iron is an art form. He walked across the room towards an ornate case. Let me show you. That's okay, my iron, he cried out in panic. Eddie showed me the empty case. Where is it? How? Eddie sank to his knees, tears spilling from his eyes. My glorious iron. I can't believe it's gone. Mr. Wu, I don't care about your needs, detective. What about mine? My iron is missing. The perfect soul plate. unblemished by steam holes, polished to a high shine. Did you know I had a custom handle built to fit my hand perfectly? My heart skipped a beat, and an image of my wife thrust itself into my head. The iron mark on her face wasn't perfectly smooth. There were spots, steam holes, but Sean's mark had no holes. He was killed with a dry iron. "Mr. Wu?" I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "Who else here is a dry iron aficionado? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." Eddie grinned like the Cheshire Cat. "Sean Morrison. Did anyone else know?" Eddie shrugged. "This is a small world, detective. It's hard to hide something so scandalous." His grin faded. "You should talk to Thomas." "Thomas Prince." Thomas jerked up in surprise as I walked in the door. He set aside the iron he was cradling and wiped a tear from his eye. "Mr. Prince, how well do you know the others at this convention?" "Well, me and Sean go way back, of course. Eddie's been around for a while. We don't agree on irons, but he's a nice guy. Marin came into the mix a couple years ago. Noah's been the president of EIUS for a long time, but he mostly keeps to himself. I don't know him that well. Do you know if anyone might have a motive to harm Mr. Morrison?" Marin and Sean have been together for a long time, but that's been falling apart. Thomas made a face. "She's a real piece of work. I wouldn't trust her with my iron under any circumstances, but I don't really know the others well enough to say." I took a deep breath. "Did you know that Sean was secretly into dry irons?" Thomas winced. "I went to visit him after he argued with Noah. He was really stressed out. I don't think he meant to tell me, but he slipped up. He told me about his preference for dry irons." "Go on." "I was shocked, you know. We had spent years talking about the merits of steam irons over dry." Thomas threw his hands in the air. "I mean, you can use a steam iron as a dry iron." But he just kept talking about how cool Eddie's iron was. Thomas stood and walked to the window. I asked him if I could have his championship-winning steam iron. And I know it was kind of selfish to even ask, but it's a steam iron. He faced me, his mouth hard. If he was so into dry irons, there's no reason he needed to keep that one. I knew the answer already. He said no. Thomas hung his head. Yeah, that's when I noticed it. A plug barely poked out from under the hotel's dresser. Thomas noted my pause and followed my gaze. We lunged at the same time, but I reached the dresser first, knelt, and yanked the cord, and there it was. The Oster Heavyweight GCSTGB 1109 Classic, stained with what was surely the victim's blood. Eddie Wu's missing iron. I expected to fight my way out of the situation, but Thomas sat down heavily and exhaled. I didn't mean to kill him. I backed away from Thomas to the room door. Sean had Eddie's iron in his room. He was messing with it. I think he was trying to break it, so Eddie wouldn't win in today's competition. Thomas groaned. And that was bad enough. If the sponsors found out, we'd lose all those investments. But when he refused to give me his steam iron, I just snapped. I stuck my head out the door and motioned for the nearest officer to assist me. Before I could even think about what I was doing, Sean was on the floor, and I was holding Eddie's iron. I brought it back here to hide it, but you see how much good that did me. Thomas looked down at his hands. I'll never iron again. The officer casually entered the room. I won't resist, he said, looking straight at me. I messed up. Mr. Prince, please remain still, the officer said gently as she bent down and handcuffed Thomas's hands behind his back. The officer led Thomas away, but the satisfaction of solving the case rang hollow in my heart. I returned to other suspects to tell them they were free to go. When I got to Marin's room, she simply nodded and started packing her things. But there was something I had to know. Did you know your boyfriend was a dry iron promoter? Marin's eyes widened. Sean's been advocating the benefits of steam irons, both in competition and in the home, for years. The slight tremble in her voice gave her away. She was hiding something. What aren't you telling me, Ms. Knox? She stared at the floor and bit her lip. Look, he'd always use a steam iron for shows and competitions because that's what people expected. He had a sponsor to please, a wealthy one. But behind closed doors, Marin took a deep, shuddering breath. Behind closed doors, we used a dry iron. She buried her face in her hands. Oh God, you can't tell anyone. His reputation would be destroyed. The sponsor would pull all their funding out of the projects he and Thomas were working on. Like what? They had an idea to improve this older model steam iron, right? To make it more efficient and easier to clean. The steam holes on that model were tough to clean, but it was otherwise a great iron. I would even use it sometimes when he wasn't at home. I liked it better than his dry iron. She laughed sadly. He would have been so mad. Marin stood up and started to pace. Anyway, he never got a new steam iron, so he always used the same one. His championship iron. It was iconic, blue and white. Have you ever seen it? Something in her voice made me uneasy. Let me show you, Marin continued. It's beautiful, Xavier. How do you know my name? She opened a decorative case near the foot of the hotel bed and pulled out an iron. My blood ran cold. It was a Bosch TDA 2650 G quick fill. Marin smirked at my expression. You recognize it, don't you? Or rather, you recognize the shape of the sole plate. It was the same one that killed your wife 8 years ago. She stepped closer, her grin widening. He did it, you know? Sean killed her. She found out his secret obsession with dry irons. and he couldn't allow her to talk. I inched my hand towards my concealed pistol. "Put the Bosch down, Marin. You don't have to do this." Marin raised the iron, her pupils dilated with madness. "But I've always wanted to know what it felt like, what it could feel like to kill someone." She swung the iron towards my head, barely missing. I called for backup and pulled out my pistol to defend myself. "I don't want to shoot you." 2 police officers swept into the room before I had to take any further actions. Marin was quickly disarmed and handcuffed. She glared at me as the officers pulled her from the room, but she said nothing further. My heart ached with memories of my wife. Whether he knew it or not, Thomas had given her a little bit of justice, but that didn't excuse his actions. He would be behind bars for a long time. Marin would serve time for being an accessory to murder, for covering up Sean's crimes. I would have preferred to see Sean stand trial, to look into his face with satisfaction as the bailiffs hauled him away. I would have to content myself knowing the truth of my wife's murder had finally been ironed out. Muddled murder. The first thing I saw when I woke up was the blood. My mind went into a full panic mode, and I flipped out. I started checking all over myself to see where I had been injured, my bloody hands smearing the blood all over my clothes. Then I realized I wasn't injured, which could only mean one thing. It was someone else's blood, but whose? I had no idea. In fact, I had no idea where I was. All I could see around me was a dark, narrow street. I was standing on the sidewalk, quite far away from the nearest streetlight. Above me was the clear night sky. A handful of stars shone down upon me, and I felt that they were supposed to give me some comfort, but my heart rate refused to slow down. And then I saw it. There was a body on the curb, barely 10 meters away from me. My natural instinct was to go and check on the person, but something stopped me. I wondered what, but my memory refused to provide me with anything in my past. I tiptoed closer. Not another soul in the alley as I went and checked. I was still a couple of meters away from the man when I realized he wasn't breathing. There was a pool of blood spreading from his torso and onto the sidewalk. The man was dead, and I had blood on my hands. I didn't need any memory to add up the two. A car's headlights suddenly flashed to life in front of me, and the engine revved on. It reversed a bit, and then sped past me, barely giving me enough time to register the man sitting inside. From the small pharmacy in front of me, a short, bearded man came out and started pulling down the shutter. I did the first thing that came to my mind. I ran. I had no idea how long I had run for, but I am sure it was a pretty long time because my t-shirt was completely soaked in sweat by the time I stopped, and it was an early winter evening. I realized I was on a bridge, a few cars going by, couples walking holding hands, families with little children. I wondered who my parents were, if I was married, or had a romantic lover. If I only had my memories back, my life. But the sight of my hand snapped me right out of those thoughts. It didn't matter, because nobody would want to be related to a murderer. I didn't know if someone else had killed him, or if it had been me. But suddenly, it occurred to me that it would be better if I didn't know. If I did remember my past, what if I realized that I had murdered him? Not only him, but maybe others too. Just that thought made me doubt myself, and wanting my memories back seemed like a dangerous option. I descended the bridge to reach the turbid river flowing past me, and thankfully washed up my bright red hands in the water. My hands were numb by the time I stood up to return to the upper roads. That was when I heard something. "Oh, it was easy as cake," a man said. "Are you sure no one was there?" asked a woman. "I think I saw a girl, and she saw me." I panicked and drove forward, but the car hit her head, and she collapsed to the ground. I didn't know what to do, and I stopped to check, but she was stirring up, so I raced away, the man replied. It was coming from the other side of the bridge, beyond the wall separating the riverbank for the construction of the bridge. I tiptoed over to it and peeked out to see who was talking. Smoke blew out from a man's dark lips as he put a cigarette into his mouth again, leaning on the wall. The woman was standing across from him, arms crossed, in oversized, baggy clothes. She had a beanie on her head and wore huge, funky glasses. She was facing me, but I was well hidden in the dark. They continued talking, not caring to keep their voices down. "You dolt, the body is still there?" the woman asked. "Abandoned on the sidewalk. Shouldn't be noticed by anyone till tomorrow morning. By then, we'll be long gone." The man was nonchalant. The woman nodded, a bit anxious, while he smoked for a minute more. Then they both started climbing up the riverbank. I followed them after some time, composing my thoughts and struggling to remember something. I thought I must have waited for a minute or two, but I somehow still saw the car leaving with the two people in it, and the slate of my memory, which had been wiped clean, managed to store the number in it. Police sirens made their way to my ears, and I was a bit surprised my blank mind recognized it. Had I heard them many times before? Was I actually a criminal? What was my past? I somehow didn't want to find out. I just stood frozen there, above the riverbank, in the headlights of the police cars, as they advanced towards me. I was literally unable to move, dead tired and fatigued. "Hands up in the air," came a voice over the loudspeaker. My addled mind did as I was told. The next few minutes were a blur as the cops came out, handcuffed me, charged me for the murder of a famous entrepreneur, and took me to the police station for questioning. Somewhere along the way, I fell unconscious. Did you kill Mr. Pop? I knew that was the name the entrepreneur was known by, but it sounded funny. I bit back a chuckle. I don't know, I answered, just like I had the 3 last times. I have all night, the officer told me. Keep sitting then. I hope your butt doesn't hurt. I almost smirked. He glared daggers at me, and then stood up and left the room. A few minutes later, another officer entered. A plump, middle-aged woman. Answer honestly. Did you kill Mr. Pop? I have been telling you honestly. I have no idea whether I did or I didn't. I just woke up with no memory of where I was or who I was. I yelled at her, yelled. She nodded in sympathy. Quite common in criminals. I was too tired to correct her, but I was exasperated. Why couldn't they just understand I was telling the truth? Nothing in my head tells me that I killed that man, so I don't know, I declared. There is quite some evidence, you know. The blood on your clothes matches with his. I looked down at the red spots and smears on my clothes and winced. And a shop owner in the alley says that he saw a girl with a description like yours run away from the dead body. Same orange t-shirt, same long braid, and same camo pants. Now tell me, what am I supposed to believe? She raised an eyebrow. I really don't know, I said. The description was me all right, and I had run away. But had I killed the man? Unsure guilt surged through my veins, and the officer noticed the beads of sweat on my forehead. If I was the murderer, I was just making their jobs harder. But then, I didn't want to find out. Unsure guilt was stressful enough, and I didn't know how I could live with the knowledge that I had killed a human being in cold blood. Are you sure you don't want to confess anything? She asked with a tone of finality in her sweet voice. I would confess if I remembered anything, I replied. Then I suddenly remembered something. Wait, what's wrong? The lady officer leaned forward, eyebrows knitted together. I saw that car leave the bridge tonight. The 2 people in it, they were talking about something suspicious, I said, racking my brain for the words. The man raised an eyebrow. What? I'm not sure. They were saying that they left a body on the sidewalk. A girl had seen it. They hit her head and run away. They were planning to escape tonight. I narrated the incident. How does that make a difference? It does, I said, as I saw my spark of hope being snatched away with it. You should check. I remember the car number. You know the number plate, huh? The 2 police officers had tracked the number plate to a road by the river, where a car had been abandoned. Go home, the woman told me. I don't know where I live. Then wait here. We're going alone. I scowled as I followed them out of the police station, and their car revved away. Then I saw a cab passing me and jumped in. Follow that car! We followed the car for 25 minutes until we reached a road running parallel to the river. The police car had stopped behind the car I had seen before, and I told the cab driver to park behind it and jumped off. I rushed to the shore where I could see the river and a small boathouse in the distance. The river was wide at that point, the current slow. To my left were the mountains into which the river bent, and my right were the police officers near the boathouse about half a kilometer away. I saw the man and woman I had seen earlier, along with a dark guy in shoes, pull out a rusty old motorboat and push it into the water and jump on. "Put your hands in the air. You cannot escape tonight." The officers pointed their gun at them. In their surprise, someone suddenly activated the turbines, and they sped ahead into the river, moving towards my side. The motorboat was slow. The turbines were sputtering and malfunctioning as the boat raced away, forearmed the routing and chasing officers. I don't know what I was thinking, but I barely hesitated a second before jumping into the river to my left. They were speeding towards my side, cutting through the middle of the river. I was perpendicularly closer, and I knew I could reach the center before they did. I swam in smooth, rapid strokes, cutting through the water like a literal fish as I aimed towards the center where they would reach in about 10 seconds. I think they were too preoccupied keeping their eyes on the officers because they certainly didn't see me coming. The cold water didn't faze me. It was like it was part of my blood. Of course, the adrenaline counteracted it, and I had no trouble speeding through the limpid surface. As expected, I reached 1 second before their boat. As it zoomed past me, I somehow managed to grab hold of the end. I clambered on, somehow still unnoticed by the 3 people, while the officers stared at me, flabbergasted. They were too scared to shoot, let it hurt me, so it all depended on me. I crept forward and elbowed the cigarette man in the neck sharply, that he fell to the ground immediately, somehow unconscious. The woman turned to me, ready to battle in her large hanging clothes. I ducked to avoid her punch, grabbed her arm, and twisted it behind her back. Then I kicked her off the boat as it continued speeding away. The last man was the one with the shades, driving the boat. He stepped out of the seat while the boat continued towards the hills and turned to face me. Even though I couldn't see his eyes, a chill ran down my spine, and he attacked. I think my brain was a little slow to process as his kick swept me off my feet and knocked the air out of my lungs. Panting, I pushed at the floor to get up, while he grabbed my hair and pushed my head towards the whirring motors of the boat. He pressurized me into the blades, while I used all my physical strength to hold my head up. He pushed once, twice, and the 3rd time, I finally got a grip with one hand to ram the other into his sternum. As he doubled back, I realized that the boat was heading straight for a wall of soil and bushes. A hill was straight ahead. I rushed towards the wheel, but before I could rush it, the man got up and tugged me back. I wrestled with him, watching the imminent crash drifting closer. He kicked my thigh, and I launched a punch at his shoulder, ran again for the wheel. Grabbing the cool metal, I yanked it to the right, just as the boat curved around the edge of the hill, and barely avoided the collision. The man with shades had managed to stand up at the end of the boat, but my sudden turn threw him off balance, and he splashed into the water. I steered the boat towards the shore as I saw the other two criminals climbing out and being ambushed by the police officers. I finally parked along the bank and stepped out, my mind in a whirl, even more muddled than before. The two officers emerged, dragging along the two criminals. The woman went onto the boat and brought the third guy, then came back, and both of them patted my back. But I wasn't paying attention. My mind was elsewhere. How did I know how to do all that? How did I swim so well, or fight so brutally? The worst thought crept into my head. I could be a trained assassin or mercenary. I was too much of an expert, and I had been pretty close to the dead man. I was scared that I had led the police on a wild goose chase. I must be the real criminal. I must have killed Mr. Pop. I didn't want to find out. When I voiced my concerns, the police officers waved them away, too busy congratulating me. But my head refused to believe them, fearful of what my past could hold. Hey, do you remember me? A man rushed into the hospital ward, worry lines creasing over his forehead. Two people who claimed to be my parents were standing on one side of my bed, explaining to me that he was my brother. I'm sorry, but no, I said, and he looked like he was about to burst into tears. My parents leaned over and hugged him as they also squeezed my hands. I saw the two police officers appear from the door. They had huge grins on their faces. All three of them confessed to the murder, and we also found them guilty of a couple more. They have been duly imprisoned. Great work, kid, the man said. And on top of that, it was announced a couple of hours ago that you are going to be awarded a bravery medal for your courage. The woman was about to jump up and down. I found it difficult to smile. But how was I able to defeat them so easily? How could I fight so well, swim so smoothly? Are you sure I'm not a danger to society? My brow was furrowed. No. Not at all. The man who was supposed to be my father guffawed and slapped my thigh. Don't worry. I'll tell you a bit about yourself. You are 26, won 7 medals for swimming in high school, and now teach martial arts at a renowned academy. Revenge is best served from the dead. My name is Danny Donahue, And I am not your ordinary 14-year-old boy from Southern California. Well, I guess I may be ordinary, except for one teeny thing, but I guess that normal. Nobody is just ordinary. Heck, what does ordinary even mean? I guess I will never know. Because I am not your ordinary boy. I am Danny Donahue, the boy who helps ghosts cross into their next life. Movies weren't wrong. There are ghosts on Earth, and sometimes they might get stuck on Earth because they have unfinished business with someone or themselves. Ugh. They can't even get peace after they die. I thought, when we die, we are finally at peace. I guess, sadly not. Most of the time, it's something simple, like apologizing to someone, or something similar to that. But other times, it was hard. It wasn't because a task was too hard or complicated. No, it was because the ghosts themselves didn't even know what they had left to do. And that is something frustrating. I know what you may be thinking. What do his parents think? Probably think he belongs in the lunny bin. If you thought that, you thought wrong. His parents, Estelle and Venerable Donahue, possessed the same abilities their son had. But this story is my weirdest adventure yet. I still wonder if it actually even happened. It's kind of crazy, and Danny doesn't want to brag or anything, but he was quite awesome, if he had to say. This story started when my family and I had moved from Southern California to New York City. We only had moved here because this was the city populated with wandering souls, which just meant more stress on me. My social life was non-existent. My parents had homeschooled me since second grade, when I began helping them out. But this unbelievable, well, me saying ghosts are real is already quite unbelievable, story started when I moved into my family's new apartment in the busy part of New York. When my parents weren't super cool ghost helpers, they were journalists. And might I add, mighty fine when they did their work. But that meant they barely had time to spend with me. I had opened the bright red door to the quite large apartment, opening my arms and breathing the new place in. I was quite excited to be living here. I never had been to New York before, and it seemed magical. When I had walked into my plain, empty room, I spotted a ghost. Great, can't even sleep one night without someone barging in. Danny grumbled to himself. I didn't think the ghost boy saw me. Who wouldn't? I am pretty handsome, Danny thought, running a hand through his thick black hair. I don't think the dead boy had seen me, and if he had, he hadn't acknowledged me yet. Then the ghost boy had walked over to me from fiddling the sustains and slammed the door behind me. I just realized that the ghost thought I couldn't see him. After I realized that I went over to the formerly alive boy and said, "Hi." Never thought I would have spooked a ghost, but I guess I did, because it looked like The ghost seemed startled. "You can see me." The tall ghost pointed up and down to himself, unsure. "Since I'm talking to you, I'm pretty sure I can," I said, as it was obvious. "Sorry, I'm really dead. The best scenario would be that I was dreaming, but I'm not, right?" The ghost mumbled on. "No, you are sadly dead, and I'm alive, and I can see you, but other people can't. Well, most people can't. By the way, my name is Danny," he stated while putting down boxes of his random junk on the floor. "Well, nice to meet you, Danny. My name is Nicholas." The ghost, Nicholas, smiled at him. "Danny, come here. We need your help." Danny's dad hollered from outside the apartment. I was sure the whole floor could hear him. "Sure thing." "Wait, hold on. You and your parents are going to be living here?" Nicholas questioned. "And can they see me? Or are you like some chosen one thing?" "Yes, and yes. My parents can see ghosts too. And our job is to help you move on," Danny said, opening the door and walking over to help his parents. But Nicholas had stayed in the same spot, not wanting to talk to Danny's parents. After all, he hadn't had any interaction with a living or a dead person in 2 years. He had gotten used to staying in the shadows and just listening to other people talk. I had come back with another enormous and heavy box and dropped it on the floor, making a loud whump sound. "So, Nicholas," Danny said, testing his name on how it felt in his mouth. "Why are you still here?" "I don't know." Nicholas shrugged. "Then think of something stopping you from resting in peace." Then I walked back out of my room to grab more boxes. I had told my parents I had to set up my room and didn't want them to see it, only after I finished, so I would have an excuse to stay in my room. And plus, Nicholas didn't want to see my parents for some reason. Nicholas and I talked in hush whispers for hours that day, but he still couldn't think of any reason why he would still be a ghost. But a ghost, technically, is a person who is only partially dead. But he could think of anything. I had, though, learned that Nicholas was 47, but he had died 2 years ago in a drowning accident. I had urged him to tell me the reason for how he drowned, but he didn't say. Until an hour of my excellent persuasion, he told me that he couldn't swim and died before anyone got to him. I always knew I had good convincing skills. A couple of days passed, and still nothing. Danny just wanted to bring Nicholas to his parents, but Nicholas always refused. Ugh, if I went up to him, they would have probably figured out the reason for his reason to stay with the living. "Okay, Danny, I think I might know why I am not really dead yet," Nicholas huffed out. He seemed slightly embarrassed, but more so angry. "Finally! Been waiting for this for a while," Danny said, stretching back on his chair, taking a break from an easy he had to complete by 2 hours. Okay, so I lied. I didn't die by drowning, just to let you know I can swim. But I was drowned by my kids exactly 2 years ago. And I think the forgive and forget part hasn't exactly worked. And I think I might want revenge on those brats. Nicholas said in a hushed voice, not sure if he really trusted Danny. But if Danny said that he could help him, he might finally get avenged for his death. My eyes literally felt like they might come out of my eye sockets. Hold on, buddy. Just what? Danny said, shock clearly visible on his face. The ghost I always helped had simple tasks, and maybe once in a blue moon, it might be a little interesting. But this was just out of this world crazy. No more like out of the universe. So basically, you're telling me that you were some rich dude with spoiled brats for kids, and then when you were about to die, you decided to change your will so that your sister gets most of it? Danny asked, still thinking this was a really small reason to kill your dad, even if he was a billionaire and didn't even give you 1% of it. Yes, but you see, before I could change the will, they somehow found out about me changing it, so they killed me, so they would get over 80% of my money and estate. What happened to your wife? Danny wondered. She died a year before me, Nicholas said, with a sad smile, probably remembering his wife. So what do you want to do? I'm assuming you want payback, Danny said, raising an eyebrow. Yes, and I have been planning it for 2 years, so it's basically foolproof, Nicholas said with a smile. Family drama. Danny chuckled a little while thinking this. Then, that day, Nicholas told me what he had in mind, and I am not going to lie. It was quite clever. I guess when you have 2 years to think of a plan, and not any plan. A plan to get revenge on your killers. You would want to perfect it. Nicholas had been living in Danny's room for almost a year. And since Nicholas started living in this apartment, he always scared future tenants. Except for the Donahues, because they could see him. The strange thing was my parents still hadn't spotted Nicholas yet. Strange indeed. Nicholas had been living in this apartment specifically because it was right next to, you would never guess who, his kids' apartments. Every time he saw them, he felt sadness for what he let them become. But then the sadness turned into anger, and his blood started boiling whenever he looked at them for what he did to him. The next day, we started putting Nicholas's plan into action. But for one part of it, I had to borrow something from my parents without raising suspicion. I had to borrow a special drink that if a ghost drank it, they would be invisible, but be able to touch not too heavy stuff. I thought talking the elixir would be difficult, but it proved to be easy, since my mom was out meeting some new friends she had made, and my dad had gone grocery shopping. So I took the elixir with ease. After he got it, he gave it to Nicholas. And Nicholas slurped the dark bluish liquid down with one gulp. "Slow down, Nicky. You don't want to get a stomach ache," Danny teased. "First off, don't call me Nicky. And second, I am too excited." Nicholas seemed exhilarated. After the Donahue's concoction started settling in Nicholas's body, they tested it out to see if it really worked. They even tried the classical ghost picking up book thing, and behold, it worked. Almost as if Nicholas were alive. After that, Nicholas was extremely giddy and excited to get his plan in motion. After what seemed like half an hour, I finally thought we had enough of the playing, and now we had to get the work done. Nicholas had passed through and walked into his daughter, Stella's apartment. It had the same layout of which the Donahue's flat was, but theirs was more on the old side, whereas Stella's place was more modern and high-tech. Danny just had Nicholas go into the apartment and find the key to the front door and slide it over to Danny. Yes, the floor cracks were quite large. "Don't worry, she comes back in an hour. So that gives us an hour to play golf," Nicholas said with a smirk, grabbing a baseball bat and ruining all the expensive furniture and decor in the house. "I don't mind. I think that this should be all yours. You deserve this," Danny said with a dramatic bow, pretending Nicholas was royalty. He practically was. He was a billionaire. "Why, thank you," Nicholas said with amusement. After an hour of playing golf, they had successfully destroyed everything. Then the door opened, and you could hear screaming. But in my opinion, it sounded like a cat being hit by a car. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Not that painting! Not that painting! That cost too much to end up like this," said Stella, running around, looking through her apartment. Nicola watched with enjoyment as his daughter was running around checking her possessions that she had bought with his money. After all, it was his money, so it was his stuff too. "Hello, Stella. I hoped you learned a lesson about why you shouldn't kill people, especially not family." Nicholas boomed from standing beside the TV, and then she shattered the expensive screen. "What are you doing? Who are you? I'm calling with the cops. Get out of my place," Stella yelled back, visibly frightened, trying to sink into a wall and grabbing a hold of a knife. "My dear, you don't need to do that. I got a deal to make." Nicholas clearly enjoyed this. "I mean, Stella is a murder, so this should be okay. What do you want?" Stella stuttered, but tried keeping her head high. "I want you to donate all the money you got from your father's will." "Why is this your concern?" Stella sneered back, still nervous. "Don't you cut me off again," Nicholas shouted. "The second thing you must do, or I will follow you and haunt you, even in your sleep. So don't you dare disobey me The second thing you must do is that you and your brother, Jeremy, will have to go to the police station and tell them you committed the murder of Nicholas DeRosa. Understood me? Nicholas seethed out. Stella just grunted and walked out the door, slamming it shut before she left her apartment. Then, Nicholas walked out of the bathroom, where I was hiding behind a shower. I know it's not the best place, but still, you did good, Nicholas. Danny smiled at him, and Nicholas beamed out a smile so bright it would make the sun look like a little flame compared to Nicholas. Nicholas and Danny did the same stuff to Nicholas's son, Jeremy DeRosa. Nicholas and Danny had to repeat this routine for 2 weeks before Jeremy donated his part of the will and went to hand himself in to the police, which meant Stella only had little time left before Jeremy told the police what happened. After a week more of Nicholas's and Danny's torture, Stella couldn't take it anymore. She went to donate her money and hand herself in with a miserable face. She only handed herself in because Nicholas had haunted her so bad that she couldn't even close her eyes to sleep. And she looked and acted like a zombie. After 8 months. I guess that's it, Danny said to Nicholas, who was about to go to the life after death. I guess it is, little buddy. Thanks again. I never thought Jeremy and Stella would be put into prison, but I guess they get their karma. Nicholas thanked Danny. Jeremy and Stella had a trial, and this time, Nichols made sure they didn't just pay the money and not get charged with anything. After 8 months of watching court fights happen, both of the DeRosa kids, well, they aren't really kids, got sent to prison. Goodbye, Danny. Thank you so much. Hope you have a happy ending to your life, Nichols said, as he vanished away into thin air, into the afterlife. You may think the story ends here, but you're very wrong. The DeRosa kids had mysteriously died in prison, and they realized that Danny was helping their father scare them. So now the DeRosa kids were after me. And I am now basically a runaway, that I am even on national television. So proud of myself. Stella and Jeremy are coming to kill me for messing up their lives, and I am so going to end up dead meat. Victim of drug lords. He clutched onto his mother's arm tightly and staggered out the sliding panels. His mother seemed to be sighing and kept casting her amber eyes downward, as if embarrassed. Jason, I'm telling you that it happened. Don't be daft, mother. Of course, it didn't, he said, with a short, almost nervous chuckle. He stole a sideways glance at his mom, only to be met with lowered eyes. Jason's dirty blonde hair whipped around his ears in the wind. It hadn't been cut in a while, and he desperately needed one. Jason, I need you to remember what happened the night you were admitted, his mother said hurriedly. They had almost reached the sleek black car by now, one that was completely unfamiliar to Jason. Mom, I really don't remember, and I don't want to. On the contrary, Jason could remember parts of the night that he was admitted into St. Clark's Hospital. But he certainly wasn't about to tell his mother that. Broken shards of alcohol bottles scatter the floor. Bright, fluorescent lights dance across Jason's eyes. These flashbacks were all too familiar to Jason. He had woken up hungover one too many times in his life for them not to be. No, it had been the pills that turned the situation sour. He only remembered the cheers around him, edging him on. Now that he thinks of it, the feeling was quite wonderful. He looked around wildly, as if expecting pills to appear in the parking lot. "Jason, honey, what were you thinking about?" she murmured softly, as if able to see through his helpless eyes. "Just the car." Her eyes grew wide. A bubbly look arose to her face. "You remember the car?" she exclaimed, now clutching onto Jason's face with a red hand. Her nose looked as if on the verge of growing stalactites. The London icy wind whipping her caramel hair around her shoulders. Jason shrugged, shrinking away from her cold hand. After being hospitalized for this long, human contact seemed alien to him. Just thought it looked familiar. That's all. His mother nodded, as if acknowledging his distastefulness at her touch. She managed to cover up the hurt in her eyes with a glance upward at the sky. She quickly told herself that he needed time. Of course, he wouldn't be the same loving child after this traumatic experience. She was lying to herself, but she needed to know what had happened. All she knew was that he hadn't been home, and when she woke up the next day and his bed was empty, the hospital had called her. She managed to pull herself out of her reverie before he noticed anything. She turned the keys in the ignition and used the loud rumble as a cover to sniffle a stray tear back up. She started reversing out of the parking lot when Jason suddenly yelped. "What?" his mother cried out, stopping the car abruptly with a disgruntled look clouding her soft features. "I'm not wearing my seatbelt." His mother looked baffled for a moment. "I don't remember how," Jason muttered, not making eye contact. "Oh, for God's sake." His mom reached over and buckled him in. She wasn't mad, really. It was just so strange that she had no clue how to act around this new Jason. She briefly thought of how different everything would now be before reminding herself of her emotional state and decided not to. Her eyes trained on the road. She kept her mind on the task at hand for the time being. Jason, on the other hand, was allowing his mind to wander freely, stealing the occasional glance toward his mother. He felt guilty. Of course he felt guilty. But there was this dark pit of resentment towards his mom that he was unable to explain. Maybe it was him, or even his imagination, but she seemed off. "Honey, I just have to stop off at a friend's house to drop some taster cupcakes off." She owned a cupcake business on the edge of town, a successful one at that, too. Now, looking out the window, Jason gave a curt nod, not turning around. The sleek, black car turned sharply into the friend's driveway in a lovely, bucolic setting. It was a 2-story brick house, slathered in white paint and large windows adorning the front. Curtains served as a block, so passers-by would be unable to look inwards. Rose bushes enclosed the low gate that led up to the house. Jason's mother put the car in park and climbed out, taking the bright-colored cupcakes with her. Jason turned around for a split second to look at his mother. The cupcakes caught his eye, reminding him of the multicolored disco lights at the party. He looked away stiffly. The door slammed shut, and the overwhelming heat from the golden rays of sunlight settled over Jason like a thick, woolen blanket. He shivered and curled up on the seat. The silence was comforting. Meanwhile, Jason's mother had rung the doorbell of the house 3 times. She counted down in her head. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Hello, Barbara," a deep voice said. Standing in the doorway was a tall, bulky man, his unshaven face causing the mere dichotomy between Barbara's, or Jason's mother's, smooth, round face and his rather wrinkly-looking one to become more apparent by the second. However, he didn't appear to be old, just poorly taken care of. Barbara gave him a dirty look and pushed through him and into the house. She now stood in a room or junkyard. It was impossible to tell. She dropped the cupcakes on the floor indifferently. There was only one lamp with lace trimmings turned on, the room relying on this one dim source of light to be illuminated. Rubbish was strewn across the floor, empty cans of soda and cartons of milk. Barbara wrinkled her nose at the mess. "What, too low class for your liking?" he inquired with raised eyebrows. She proceeded to ignore him with a haughty tilt of her head. "Let's get down to business, Tom," she said, arms crossed on her chest. "Barbara, I couldn't give him any heavier ones, okay?" he said with downcast eyes. The teens at the party were already looking at me funny as it was. Lucky I only popped him a few pills. Barbara opened her mouth to interject, but he interrupted her. "Before you ask, I was wearing a mask, and half of them were too high to see my face anyway." "Okay," she nodded slowly. "Look, Tom, we agreed on a price. Only if you could put him in a coma for 3 months, and you achieved only 1 of those months. He wasn't supposed to wake up today. How the hell will I take him home with all the drug shipments lying around?" Her amber eyes blazed alive like fire. She had been subconsciously walking closer to him, as steady as possible, with her red stilettos upon Rubbish. Tom sighs and pulls something out of his pocket. "I gave him 5, Barbara. 5! The kid must be crazy to be able to handle all of that." In the dim light, The pills were indiscernible to Barbara. "Tom, which ones did you give him?" Tom walked over to the curtain and pulled one of the curtains right back. He blinked in the sunlight as if he had never seen natural light before. "Ah, that's much better," he grunted. Meanwhile, out of the house, Jason was getting rather hot in the car. His mother had also been gone for an awful lot of time for just dropping off cupcakes. He tried to pull open the door, but it was locked. Weird, he thought. He reached over and unlocked the door from the driver's side. He climbed out carefully, the soft patch of grass beneath him, easing his landing. He shielded his eyes from the bright sun and noticed the pulled-back curtain on the ground floor. Quickly assessing the weird events on his mother's part throughout the day so far, he decided to just take a peek before ringing the doorbell. Jason crept stealthily up the path and through the low gate. He positioned himself in a way that his body would be invisible to anyone in the home by the other drawn curtain. So he was able to lean a little to the right and see what was going on. "I must look very strange to any passers-by," he thought to himself. Stifling a nervous giggle, he tended to laugh when he was nervous. It had gotten him into heaps of trouble during test-taking at school. But Jason couldn't care less about school and their stupid, restrictive rules. Balancing mainly on his right foot, he leaned a little to the right. His eyes were met with quite a scene. But Jason was blind to all when he saw it. The pills, the pure white, and streaks of childish yellow throughout the little pill. His memories rushed back in a torrent, and as he looked at the man, the more familiar the face became. He was the guy who popped the pills for him and then dragged him out of the party. He watched through the clear glass as his mother paid the man. Suicide pact. Every Friday, my parents cook the most delicious turkey that has ever existed on Earth. They use natural ingredients that I have never heard of before. Every time they make it, I ask them for the recipe. They just never tell me. Instead, they look at me with a smile mixed with sadness and joy, and tell me that one day, when their time has come to pass, they will tell me. Tell me the secret ingredient. This is the routine that happens every week, every Friday. Little do they know that their time will be my time too. Although I know that my parents won't tell me the recipe, I give it another shot. Walk up to them, give them my best smile, take their hands, and ask. But they already know what I am going to say. They grin and shakes their heads, nodding towards my room, sending me the message to get ready for bed. I sigh and slump towards my room. I stop in front of my door. The door is decorated with pictures from my favorite band. The picture on the very left makes me smile. It's the picture of my favorite band member making a silly face. I laugh dreamily and stare into his brown eyes, but I'm not the only one laughing. Soon enough, my older brother Luke is pounding me on the back and laughing. Not really a nice laugh either. "Lola, you've got to stop this," he chokes out. "Stop what?" I demand, my brows furrowed. "Stop joking around with your pictures. It's too funny to handle." I raise my eyebrows high and stare at him, long and hard. Finally, I shoot him a glare and step into my room. I don't forget to slam the door right into his laughing face. See, this is the reason I need to get away from my family. My brother. He is so annoying. You wish that you weren't born. And I don't. Yes, I am killing myself because of my brother. It was either this or run away. But if you run away, you just get kidnapped and killed anyway. So what's the difference? Once safely in my room, and my brother gone, I sneak into my closet and pull out the small but strong bulletin board that I got from my grandmother on my birthday. I forgot to check yesterday's square on the calendar, so I will do it with today's. I take the white chalk I have been using the past month out of the box that it was in and slash 2 white lines next to the others. When done, I carefully put everything back in my closet and lie on my bed. Breathing slowly, I run down the suicide plan in my mind. When I come back to my room from brushing my teeth, something in the room is different. The lights are off. Did Mom come in here? Dad couldn't, because he's in Miami for work. Oh no. What if my brother came in here? I try to shrug it off and crawl under my covers. The whooshing of the wind outside quickly drowns me in my sleep, and all my thoughts are lost. The next morning, I get up late. I quickly eat breakfast and get ready for school. I arrive at school on time, but I'm still worried about the lights turned off yesterday. Someone must have went into my room, did something, and forgotten that the lights had already been on when they went in. My worried look must be severe, because Angie, my best friend, asks me if I am all right at lunch. "Oh, I'm fine, I reply. Her head is cocked to the side, and she studies me closely. I try to give her a brief smile and shrug it off. This is a good idea, because Angie knows that my shrugs are all truthful and intentional. I feel so bad, though, for betraying and lying to my friend, even though she can help me get out of this mess. I remind myself that some things are meant to be dealt with alone and individually, but I still feel bad. So before the lunch bell rings, I ask her if she wants to come over, and her face lightens. She tells me, of course. When school ends, we meet up at our usual spot near the gate and start to walk towards my house. We talk about the usual things: hallway gossip, grades, and boys. When we get to my house, we watch a movie and make slime, which fortunately takes my mind off things. Before Angie leaves, she hugs me tight and whispers into my ear that she knows something is wrong and that she can help me anytime with it. She tells me that I am never alone. If only that were true. Even after our time together, Angie and I only used up 3 hours of our time. I still have 1 hour left to chill. I get bored, so I decide to slash today's mark earlier than usual and head into my closet. When I pull out the bulletin board, though, all the tally marks are gone. I'm so shocked that I gasp out loud. What? What? I stutter. I was not going to let this go. If someone had done this, only my brother could. My mother wouldn't do such an evil thing. But if my brother had read the notebook, then he would know that he was being such a pain. I wait until he comes home from work and confront him. It did not work as well as I thought, though. He convinces me that I can't kill myself because of one person, that I need more bad things in my life to hate myself enough and kill myself. We sort it out, and he swears to not be much of a pain anymore. I guess some things are meant to be dealt with by talking and not action. I have learned my lesson. Countdown to death. I stared at the wall with half-lidded eyes and gulped. My breath was hoarse and croaky, my throat dry and absent of hydration. My hands trembled uncontrollably, scrambling for the cheap chalk, even though my eyes never once graced the sight of the white stick. My exhales were never rhythmic, constantly choking on the air as I mentally tried to inhale and exhale at the same time. I looked at every line drawn individually, memorizing what each meant to every detail of the messy scratch. There drawn were tallies, 42 singular ones, 8 full ones, with 2 to spare, to be exact. Each resembled each day I was kept here, in this hell. And they were slowly counting down to the inevitable release. I had 3 more weeks to fully understand my limited time here. My eyes suddenly widened as I let out a scream of terror, a scream that my fellow prisoners were very accustomed to. A scene of trauma washed over my eyes and sent my body crashing down onto the floor in pure fear. A sense of panic overwhelmed me, and my body began to sweat. All my movements henceforth were uncontrollable and predicted by the past. My emotions were painfully drowned by regretful memories that I begged to forget. I could only watch as my gravest mistake haunted me once again. "Paulette!" a gruff voice called, alerting me and distracting me from my duties. Paulette Ann Hadley. That's me. Short blue hair and matching piercing eyes. I'd dream about how they held the essence of the pure sky. But those thoughts were the only fantasies that I used to distract me from the life that I dreaded so much. Then again, I was very far from pure, even before the incident. "Paulette!" they shouted again after only a few seconds of waiting. Impatient as always, incompetent as always, the voice belonged to my master, the Earl of Daventry, Sir Peter Holmes, a sorrowful old man who spent his seemingly endless days laying in his bed or sat in his office, scoffing his face with the fatty meals the chefs were forced to cook to fulfill his never-ending stomach. He ate his feelings. I'd feel sorry for him if he weren't such a bastard. "Paulette!" he screeched for the third time, all in the span of 20 seconds, so loud that I saw the family of mice that lived in the corner of the laundry room scurry across the dusty cobblestone floors in fright. I rolled my eyes in frustration and slapped the grungy old rag I used to clean the counter into the rusty steel sink. I tightened my apron and smoothed out the traditional maid's dress, all while cursing to myself in irritation. My uniform was nothing out of the ordinary for a low-classed maid like myself. Black and white, all the way through, of course. A short black dress with a white apron, white stockings, and black buckled shoes. I hurried up the grand staircase of the large Daventry estate, my feet thanking me for gifting them of a different surface to stand on that wasn't rough, uneven stone. Luscious carpet was certainly a lovely change from grubby concrete. Reaching my master's doors was something I was always dreaded because of what lay on the other side. I pressed a hand against the shiny wood, recently dusted and glossed by yours truly. The smooth touch of the spruce was nice against my sore and worn fingertips. "Master," I greeted with a sickly sweet tone, a forced smile painting my features. I could almost feel my left eye twitch in pent-up hatred. "Paulette!" he roared, his voice deep and gravelly. He was laid down on his satin sheets that held many empty plates and cups from the meals I had brought since this morning. They were already piling up. This sight was nothing new to me. This is what I spent my life's work on. This is what drove me insanity. A plate mounted with Victoria sponge cake rested on his rising and falling stomach. Oh, how I wanted to rip it open. "Yes, master?" I repeated, my voice bearing the same bittersweetness as every phrase that escaped my lips directed to my mortifying master. "I don't pay you to lounge around. I have been waiting for hours," he scolded, only to choke on a strawberry that had been layered between the sponge. Bits of red fruit spewed out into the air and dirtied the satin sheets with spit and berry. I cringed at the sight, but tried to contain the look because of the presence of my judgmental master. I enjoyed watching him struggle. "I was just finishing up the washing, master," I responded simply, never giving him the gift of eye contact. "I don't care what you were doing," he snapped with a snarl. "Clean up this mess. I am lying in filth. Hurry up, woman." He turned to his side, without giving a care about the plate that slid off his bloated stomach and smudged jam onto the expensive emerald. "Clean me up too," he ordered, with his own ugly, toothy cringe, showing off grimy yellow teeth. I rolled my shoulders backwards and relaxed my joints in a desperate attempt to contain my rage. I took 3 deep breaths through clenched teeth and slowly walked over to my master, my anger increasing with every step. I piled the empty plates into stacks and balanced them on my forearms to get the task done in one go and get away from my master as soon as possible. My muscles tensed under the weight of so much weight and sent my body to lean forward uncontrollably and my face to squish into the duvet. This would be a simple, clumsy topple to anyone but myself. Due to the superiority complex my master harbored, a deathly scream was sent sounding around the master bedroom. "Paulette, how dare you assault me like this?" He shrieked like a toddler as he pulled away from my body as if I were a parasite. I gulped, my body pulsing with overwhelming fury. My breaths became hollow and uneven, my lungs aching at the lack of oxygen I provided. Sorry, I stuttered, my voice dipping from a forced sweetness to a deep sarcasm. A sore cough followed my words, and a ripple crawled up my spine like a wave of violent anxiety washing over me without placing my eyes upon it. My fingertips grazed the blade of a knife covered in grease. My eyes widened, and all of a sudden, my movements were prioritized over my thoughts. My grip tightened on the kitchen knife, the sharp blade digging into my finger's flesh and drawing blood. The red liquid sunk into the satin and stained the fabric. But that was no problem, as lots more blood was soon to follow after. I let out a whimper as pain soared through my nerves, but I paid no matter. My only mind's focus was on the man who stared at me in confusion and growing anger. I couldn't care less about his emotions because they soon morphed into ones of pain and shock as I stabbed the tip of the knife into his belly. I pulled my hand off the blade and smeared my blood onto his naked stomach. I subconsciously let out a joyful yelp at the sight of his blood mixing with mine and creating an uncomfortable solution of growing red. I pressed my uninjured hand against the wooden handle of the knife and pushed the blade further into my master's stomach. I hastily pulled out the deadly weapon and plunged it back into his stomach. Blood splattered onto my dress, onto the bed, and onto my face. I repeated this sequence several times, the knife constantly going in and out of the body and splashing blood. With every cut, more blood seeped and deepened the stain on my usually perfectly clean apron. My face was now smeared in the metallic-smelling liquid and was dripping down my chin as if I were slurping soup, but missed my mouth. Master died after just a few stabs due to bleeding out and contagious infection. But that didn't stop my excitement. I sliced as much flesh as I could, covering as much surface area as I could, and slathering it with fresh, pungent blood. I made sure not to leave any area untouched with my bubbling rage. My lips twitched as a laugh escaped my throat, choking on itself and departing in the form of an evil cackle. I doubled down in laughter as pure ecstasy ran through my veins. I bounced on the expensive bed and headed towards the limp head of my master. I swiftly sliced the knife across my master's throat and admired the way sickly liquid swam down his wrinkled neck and ran down his chest like separating rivers. That blood quickly melded with that of his stomach and made a pool that looked like it had originated from the depths of hell itself. I twirled on the bed, never minding my steps that prodded into my master's corpse. The authorities arrived before I had taken my leave, and I was seized before I could flee. I was captured before I could even reminisce my actions. I was taken to Egan Prison and remained there till my death. 3 months, to be exact. It was not a natural death, but a chosen one, confirmed by those who didn't even know me. I let out a gasp as the walls of my cell reappeared around me, and the touch of the cold concrete floor returned to my fingertips. My eyes widened as I took sight of the clean wall in front of me. They were gone. My tallies were gone. I let out a cough and a choke. "Help! Help!" I screamed, throwing myself at the wall and slamming a fist upon it in distress. "They're gone. They're gone. Who did this?" I demanded, punching the wall and watching blood draw my knuckles and splatter onto the gray. "Your day has come, Hadley. You're finally free." A voice mused, their tone echoing throughout my secluded cell. "What?" I gaped, blinking like a confused dog. "Free? Well, free from life, of course." They chuckled maliciously, taunting me with their freedom. I chose not to turn towards the guard that addressed me so rudely. My eyes continuously trained on the blank wall in front of me. I have a few more weeks. I don't want to die." I cried out, tears brimming my eyes and blurring my vision. Should have thought about that before you killed a man. The guard glared, pulling open the door of my cell and approaching me with handcuffs. I pressed my back against the wall, but there was no escaping death. I was quickly seized and yanked down the hallway, past my fellow death row inmates. I hung my head low, hair shadowing my eyes and creating an eerie effect. My breaths were loud as anxiety built up inside of me, a panic attack approaching at a tremendous speed that I wished to slow down. I stumbled over my footing several times, each one getting more clumsy and emotional. By now, tears were streaming down my cheeks and creating thin lines of cleanliness that contrasted with the dirt and grime that littered my flesh. I did nothing to stop the loud sobs that slipped through my trembling and muttering lips, weeping as dread and hysteria flowed through every pore. We soon reached a standstill where I was forced into a chair. I stared into vicious brown eyes that reflected my own teary ones. They held no sympathy or remorse, just a simple hue of cheek. I inhaled and exhaled harshly, every breath increasing in volume, mass, and sound. Leather-worn straps were tightened over my wrists and ankles, and a rusty metal brace was placed firmly at my temples. Fear soared through my veins like rockets. I pulled and struggled against my restraints that were quickly cutting off my blood flow. I let out screams for mercy, but they went unheard. Let me go, please. It's not my time. I have weeks. I can't die, I wailed, shaking my head violently in a weak attempt to get rid of the brace that held me so firmly. A loud slap sounded throughout the dimly lit room. My head was thrown to the side, and a pulsing sting was sent flaring at my right cheek. My pleads and sobs ceased. Just a quiet whimper left in its place as a final emotion of sorrow took its toll. Shut it, woman, a guard hissed. Paulette Ann Hadley, you are sentenced to death via electrocution for the murder of Sir Peter Holmes on January 16th, 1898. Do you have any last words? Another guard recited, his tone bearing no sincerity whatsoever. I took a deep breath, lifting my gaze and meeting his to dramatize my following words. A scowl was painted at my lips, and furrowed eyebrows of anger took over my features. He deserved it. I growled with nothing but rage in my voice, a pull at the lever, and a crackle of wiring. Electricity was sent pulsing through my brain and sparked an agony that tore scream after scream from my dry throat. Quickly, my mind was sent spiraling into the endless dark abyss known as death, life, and death. It took him 10 seconds to die. There's a lot he could have thought of in those 10 seconds. Likely among them was how he didn't want to die. There's a fear of the unknown in the heart of every human, an awareness that one day the end will come, that you won't have any control over it. Cultures around the world have stories of what will happen in death. Will you arrive at the pearly gates? Do you need payment for the ferryman to bring you to the afterlife? Or will you find yourself born again and again until you achieve enlightenment, regardless of what he believed in life? In the final moments, did it bring him comfort? Did it bring him peace? Or did he think of the past? Living by the lake, first fearing its depth as a tadpole before emerging as a conqueror, reliving the carefree moments of youth, of the rocks and sand between toes, and the sap from climbing trees, growing up with first two parents, then only one, knowing the sorrow that it can bring to one so young. Long nights at the bonfire, first with families, then with friends. The first look, the fire-glow skin, and the reflective eyes. With her came quick smiles, soft hands, and first times. The boy becoming a man as nights lengthened and the sky darkened. She left with the autumn breeze, and he left that lake too. He woke early and trained and marched. He climbed 4-meter walls, crossed ditches, spent hours at the firing range, and completed field exercises in combat gear. Discipline and mental fortitude brought on new meaning. And then they weren't exercises anymore. He would not have lingered on his military tours, but he would have seen faces of his comrades, dead and alive. With those that couldn't be saved, there'd be the guilt, the sadness, the regret. With those who survived, he'd always have a bond. His superiors who directed troops across the land. Civilians he had helped, who he hoped were doing as well as they could in a war-ravaged country. Together, they had molded him into a man with iron will and direction, rough around the edges, with kindness deep within his heart. It was a life that he'd relived in nightmares. When he left the military, he came back to the lake. Its calmness was a balm for his soul. Watching over it and the people who surrounded it calmed his mind and steadied his heart. His work was now to protect and serve the people, to wear a different uniform. He was wearing that uniform as he died. Would he be thinking of his family? He'd never been much of a cook, and he spent many nights at the Main Street diner. She too had come back to the lake, escaping the corporate ladder for the hustle and bustle of the small town, taking over the diner from the previous owners. They sat at the same table, night after night, week after week, month after month. She was a strong woman, able to stand on her own 2 feet, and with him as an equal. They'd chosen to walk their paths together, 2 homes and hearts becoming one. She'd know that this was a possibility with his work, and had never failed to say goodbye as he left. Would he take solace in this, knowing that she'd feel sorrow, grief, and pain, but that she'd be able to continue without him? Or would he worry the most about the pain in a tinier heart, to a soul that was just beginning to blossom? Ariel was 9 years old, his little girl who he had spent countless hours as a baby just counting 10 fingers and 10 toes. He taught her to ride a bike and throw a ball. They'd planned a camping trip for the summer. What would she think of his never coming back? Would she understand that it was his duty? Would she resent it and him? Would she remember all the times they'd shared? Would he be able to think at all? Would the pain override his thoughts in his last moments? Would his world focus only on that and the sounds that echoed around him? From the initial sound of the gunshot to the impact, the pain in his abdomen, and the retaliatory shot from his partner that took down the killer. They had been called for attempted shoplifting at a gas station near the highway. The cashier had caught him, and one of the customers became concerned when the situation had begun to escalate and called the police. They hadn't known about the gun. They hadn't known that the man had gone off his medications. What he did see was that there was a young boy in the store as well, no more than 12. Felix had gone in to get snacks while his dad filled the truck with gas. It was at him that the gun had been pointed in that moment. It was Felix that was saved when he died. Was it Felix that he thought of? The young boy he'd sacrificed his life to save. How would he spend his second chance at life? Would he go to the funeral and see the little girl crying in a black dress? Would he see her around school as his eyes closed for the last time? Would he see into the future? Felix becoming Ariel's self-appointed big brother and guardian, forever tied together by tragedy. Growing up together at the lake, him pushing her when required and comforting her when needed. Her ensuring that he focused on schoolwork as much as sports. Her scared and angry when he told her he was going to the police academy. That he wanted to help others like her father, who had saved him. Through times of luck and difficulty, Ariel and Felix lived them together. And one day, down by the lake where they had grown up, where her father grew up, Ariel would walk down the aisle to him with her mother by her side. Ariel and Felix would live a long life together at the lake with their family. It wasn't always easy, with fights and sadness, but they came through. When their son was born, they named him Liam, after his grandfather, and sometimes they'd sit on the porch as dusk settled around them, holding hands, thinking about the man who'd given them both so much. Though he would miss all of those moments, the foresight and knowledge that they would be okay, that they'd live a life full of happiness and love, would that give him true peace? For in those 10 seconds, Liam lived. Betrayal. Mr. Nicholas, you have been caught for breaking and entering every house in the world once a year for as long as anyone can remember. That was what the judge said. Anything to say in your defense? Your Honor, I was delivering presents. For children, they were happy, stuttered Santa. A liar! You gave me a toy doll when I was 12 years old, yelled an adult. Well, I thought you wanted one, said Santa, wondering if this was a nightmare. And you didn't wipe your feet on the mat when you came in, said a very tall and skinny woman who was the shape of a pole. Now I have to walk around my house with the smell of reindeer dung. It's that bad? I sleep next to my reindeers, and they don't smell that bad. One very fat man, who looked like if you threw him from the tallest building, he would bounce, said, "One day when I was little, I woke up on Christmas and went to my Christmas tree. I saw a box of chocolates, but guess what? It was out of date," guessed the judge. "It was covered in reindeer poop," said the skinny lady. "It was half-eaten?" asked another man. "Wrong. He had put it under the tree. I couldn't reach it." Everyone let out a gasp, as if it was worse than what they said. The judge banged his hammer against the wooden plate. All right, it's settled. A lifetime in prison. He was shipped off to a prison for magical things. There he met the Tooth Fairy and Frosty the Snowman, a black bird with an injured wing, and a man called Jeff, who claimed he was a muffin, and Neil Gaiman. He did not know what Neil Gaiman was doing in there, but he told wonderful stories of Norse gods and a girl called Coraline. Meanwhile, the elves were relaxing in the North Pole. Every day, they would congratulate each other on how they got rid of Mr. Claus, and that it was about time that they got rid of the fatty. The reindeers were happy because they thought Santa stinked. But Mrs. Claus was the most excited. She could finally fulfill her dreams of playing video games all day, every day. Thousands of years passed, and Santa became more restless in his cage. The Tooth Fairy had been eaten by his bird more times than able to be counted. And the immortal Gaiman had told thousands of tales already, and Frosty had melted more than 1,000,000 drops of water now. And Jeff, well, he sat there more than 1,000,000 minutes already. Everyone was tired, and they were sick of seeing the same things every day: stone, metal, and plastic. One night, when the guards were walking past Santa's cell, he extended one thin finger and curled it around the key. He then pulled back his hand and put the key under his tongue in his mouth. He later took out the key and began to try and push it in on the other side. His fingers fumbled, and unfortunately, he dropped the key. From inside his pocket, he retrieved a foldable walking stick and began to prod at the key, trying to pull it back, when a mosquito landed on the back of his hand and sank its sucker into his flesh. Santa dropped the stick. He slapped the insect, turning it into a fat pile of greenish yellow slime. He told his bird to go and fetch the stick. The bird did as he was told. Santa continued to prod at the key when Neil Gaiman couldn't take it anymore, and said that he should tell the bird to go and fetch the key instead of the stick. "You're right, so smart," said Santa in understanding. "Go get the key." A few hours later, he had escaped his cell and was now unlocking the cells of his friends. "All right, Muffin Man, you're okay now," said Santa. "I need my rock to turn into a muffin again," said Jeff gloomily. "Where is it then?" sighed Santa. It's on the second floor of the third room to the right. Have you been there? Asked Mr. Claus. Duh. What do you think? Then why didn't you take it yourself? I didn't know how, said Jeff. It took some time, but the group eventually found the staircase and got into the specified room. Santa picked up the rock and said, "What do you mean you didn't know how?" asked Santa. Suddenly, 2 security guards stepped out of the shadows and told them to freeze and drop the rock. Santa leaped out of the closest window, thinking that his reindeers would catch him. He instead landed on a very fat moose in the middle of a barn. "Come down here, it's safe," he yelled at the window. One by one, they each plopped down Gaiman on a horse, Jeff on a pig, Frosty on a cow, and the Tooth Fairy on a very cross farmer. The fairy produced a chain of teeth out of her dress pocket and wrapped it around the farmer, like one would do to a horse. The group, holding on to their animals, eventually rode to the town where Santa's trial had been held, just in time for Christmas Eve. At the first house, belonging to the lady that had said her floor stank of reindeer dung, Frosty gave her some sanitizer under her tree. At the second house, belonging to the adult who complained about having been given a doll at the age of 12, Gaiman gave her 2 black button eyes and a sewing needle. And at the last house, belonging to the man, had complained about the chocolates. Santa gave him Jeff in his muffin form and put him on a plate next to the tree. Santa thanked everyone, and he went back to his home, the North Pole. The elves and reindeers groaned and sighed when they saw his familiar red suit. They kicked him out and built a wall around the village of Mrs. Claus. Santa realized that he was tired of seeing the elves, so he trained his bird to be a professional polar bear and penguin trainer, and everyone lived happily ever after.